Nestled in the quiet town of Villisca, Iowa, stands a house. A house that was born witness to unspeakable horrors. It was the night of June 19th, 1912, when 8 people, 6 of them children, were brutally murdered with an axe. Over 100 years later, the Villisca Axe Murders remain unsolved, cloaked in mystery and steeped in chilling whispers of the paranormal. This is not just a retelling of the murders. This is a journey into the unsettling details that have been buried beneath the more common stories. You have heard about the brutal crime, or maybe you haven't. But what about the strange sightings before the murders, or the eerie silence that fell over the town in the aftermath? When the Moore family and their 2 young guests went to bed on that hot June evening, they had no idea the terror that awaited them. But here's what many don't know. The killer was likely inside the house, already hiding in the attic. Evidence suggested that the intruder had patiently waited in the attic, watching, listening, as the family settled in for the night. There was a discovery of cigarette butts in the attic that adds a sinister layer to the story. The attack began in the master bedroom, where Josiah and Sarah Moore were sleeping. Josiah was struck more times than any other victim with such force that the face was actually mutilated. The eyes were actually missing. The ceiling in the room bore a gouge that had a mark from the axe as it was raised to strike him. The killer, or killers, struck Sarah Moore with the blade of the axe while using the blunt side on the other victims. Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, and Paul, they were next, each bludgeoned in the head in the same brutal fashion as their parents. Afterward, the murderer returned to the master bedroom to deliver additional blows to the elder Moores, knocking over a shoe that had filled with blood. Finally, the killer then moves downstairs to the guest bedroom, where Ina and Lena were murdered. Investigators believed that all the victims, except for Lena Stillinger, had been asleep when murdered. They thought that she was awake and tried to fight back, as she was found lying crosswise on the bed with a defensive wound on her arm. There was other details that were often overlooked, like the fact that after killing the Moores and their guests, the killer covered each victim's face with clothing or blankets. Why? Was it guilt? Or was it something far more chilling, like superstition? Did you know that there was a 4-pound slab of bacon that was removed from the icebox, and it was actually found lying next to the murder weapon? The town of Villisca was obviously paralyzed with fear. But there was something more. Strange reports began to emerge from those who lived nearby. Neighbors claimed to have seen shadows moving near the Moore house long before the murders took place. Over the years, several suspects were named, but each had their own strange connection to the case, and this is where it gets wild. One of the most compelling figures in this is Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher who actually confessed to the crime only to later recant. Kelly was a man known for his strange behavior and fascination with young girls. But what's often left out of the story is that he had been seen near the house days before the murders, acting erratically. June 8th, day before the murder, 1912, he came to Villisca to teach the Children's Day services, which the Moore family actually did attend on June 9th. He left town between 5 a.m. and 5:50 a.m. Let's talk about State Senator Frank Jones. He had a bitter rivalry with Josiah Moore. Josiah Moore had worked for Frank Jones before leaving to open his own store. Moore reportedly took business away from Jones. Moore was rumored to have had a sexual affair with Jones's daughter-in-law, and some believe he actually hired someone to commit the murders. William Mansfield was involved in the theory that Senator Jones hired him, an ex-convict and former U.S. Army soldier, to murder the Moore family. 9 months before the murders, a similar case of an axe murder occurred in Colorado Springs, Colorado. 2 axe murder cases followed in Ellsworth, Kansas, and Paola, Kansas. The cases were similar enough to raise possibility of having been committed by the same person. Other murders reported as possibly being linked to these crimes included the numerous unsolved axe murders along the Southern Pacific Railroad from 1911 to 1912, the unsolved Axemen of New Orleans killings, as well as several other such murders during this time period. Then there's Henry Lee Moore, who is not related to the Moore family, was convicted of the murder of his mother and grandmother several months after the Villisca murders. Guess what his weapon of choice was, Meg?
An axe.
Also an axe.
Yes.
Then there's Paul Mueller, an immigrant from Germany, was another suspect. And then there was actually a 2017 book, The Man from the Train by Bill James and Rachel McCarthy. They actually discussed the murder and all the other murders, and they said it was Paul. He was even a subject of a year-long manhunt that was not successful. The book says after a ton of research that they believed he killed 59 people in 14 separate incidents, always selecting families based on what, Meg?
Who lived near railroad tracks and traveled by train.